Now, the judge overseeing the trial of the Minneapolis police officer charged with murdering George Floyd has slammed Californian Congresswoman Maxine Waters after the veteran Democrat called for protesters to get more confrontational if the ex-cop is cleared. Responding to a request from defence attorney Eric Nelson for a mistrial to be declared, Judge Peter Cahill accused Waters of demonstrating disrespect for the rule of law.
I just don't know how this jury, it can really be said to be that they are free from the taint of this. And now that we have U.S. representatives threatening acts of violence in relation to this specific case, it's mind-boggling to me, Judge.
Well, I'll give you that Congresswoman Waters may have given you something on appeal that may result in this whole trial being overturned.
To discuss this and more, I'm joined by former Democratic White House staffer, Barbara Heineback. Barbara, great to have you with us tonight. This is quite an extraordinary rebuke of a sitting member of Congress. We've now got House Republicans pushing to formally censure Waters for inciting violence. What do you think about that move?
It's time someone does something to Maxine because, first of all, she's Congresswoman from California. What is she even doing in Minnesota? And this is not the first time that she has encouraged and incited violence. And this trial is already, fiery enough. And it's at the point that it's close to impossible to have, if not a fair trial, something that will be at least marginally accepted, across the country and really globally. Rita, there have just been so many missteps leading up to this. First of all, the Floyd family, George Floyd's family, has received about $20 million. They're saying there's a difference in how much, but many millions of dollars already, mostly from the police. So is that a showing of guilt? And also the policeman, Derek Chauvin, he is carrying the burden, as I see it, for decades or really years of police brutality toward Black men and boys and all men and boys of color. And so he is, when people looked at his knee on George Floyd's neck, this trial is going down memory lane, and it also he bears the burden of the fact that no policeman in Minnesota has ever been found guilty for having killed a Black man. And many Americans at this point, they realize that. So I see 4 strikes at least, Rita. We have the political race baiting that took place, and that I blame our politicians for. And it was on both sides of the fence, to try to win this presidential election. That was strike 1, that they started the race baiting. I find it kind of interesting. No one's talking about a race problem when Barack Obama was president. You had 8 years of kind of quiet, and no one had a problem then. Strike 2 was Maxine Waters and what she has done, just like she did back in the election with Impeach 45. And then you have so many Blacks that are hurt for any number of things, and the Black Lives Matter and Antifa, all of the destruction that they've done across the country that the media chose to turn its back on for so many years. And this trial is just ready to ignite. And if you don't have the president, if you don't bring Maxine Waters up on some sort of charge that she took an oath to become a congressperson many years ago to uphold the Constitution, and she has broken that oath.
Oh, absolutely. But Nancy Pelosi and other Democrats have already defended her, so it'll be interesting to see if there is some consequences for that reckless rhetoric. There's a great deal of pressure on this jury to return a guilty verdict. on murder, not just manslaughter, given the media coverage like you mentioned and the threats of violence, looting and arson. If Chauvin is not found guilty of the most serious charge, could that be playing on the jurors' minds? Could that actually be a factor in the decision that they make?
I suspect so because they weren't sequestered, and I don't understand why they weren't sequestered. This trial has been building up and playing out since May 25th, 2020, in reality, in terms of those selected jurors, because unless they were living under a rock, and even if they were living out of country, unless they were off in a forest away from radio, television, all communications, how could they not have heard about this trial?
Absolutely, and they, being from the area, they would have seen the absolute destruction that BLM and Antifa and other leftist agitators caused in those communities.